deal under contract. Now what's next? The very first thing to do is not freak out. There is a process to this. And of course, when you get your first deal or you're just starting out in real estate, it can be really scary when you get that deal. You're like, oh my gosh, I have to go and get all this stuff done right away and get my money together, get the rehab bid, do all this stuff all within a very short time frame in order to close escrow on that property and be successful at your flip, at your hold, or your real estate deal in general. So today in this video, I'm going to outline the process that you need to go through from start to finish once you get that deal under contract and you just start off. So my name is Mathew Owens. I'm a California licensed CPA, a full-time real estate investor. We've flipped over 1,000 houses now and have over 35 million lent out to flippers in different markets around the country. And so it can be a chore and a bit scary to walk through that process and understand everything that you need to do and not lose a ton of money, and wait till the end to find out a very key tip on how to not lose $20,000 on a deal like we did from an issue that you should be paying attention to. So I'll be going over that at the very end. So the very first thing you need to do, like I mentioned, aside from not freaking out, is you're getting your contracts together. So a seller says yes to you, you want to make sure that you have a very easy to read contract. Maybe it's a one-pager contract so that it's understood. You have all the key provisions in there with regard to the close date, with regard to the inspection period that you have. All of that information should be on there along with your purchase price and any specialty provisions like seller financing or different strategies like that may exist. So getting your contracts together first, making sure they're signed as fast as possible, because if you don't have that contract signed, that deal can be gone to somebody else very, very quickly. Okay, so you get those contracts signed, you get the earnest money deposit put in to the closing office just like you're supposed to do in the contract, so it's locked up and ready to go. And now you have a secured contract with that earnest money deposit. You usually don't have a valid contract, and thus that deposit is to the closing office. So very, very important to make sure that occurs. And then you're going to start your making sure you document all your key dates, your inspection dates, your close dates, and communicate those dates clearly with the seller involved, so that way they are aware, hey, you need to get into that property for a full inspection on the property. You need to be able to make sure, hey, this is the close date. Can you be there for signing on that close date, or is it a mail away closing? What is the process that the seller is going to have to go through? The more you communicate and educate that seller, the better likelihood of them not falling out and feeling uncomfortable or not trusting you in one way, shape, or form. So your job is not done with just getting it under contract. You have to nurture that seller through the close of escrow, so that way you can make sure that deal gets closed. So that's one piece or one step, the initial step, as you're getting it under contract and getting it to closing. Now the next step is getting those contracts over to the title companies, getting them over to your lenders so that they can start the process and pull title on that property and start to do underwriting on that deal based on your preliminary numbers. And so the title company is going to pull title to start looking at title. You want to get that done immediately. A lot of times people put close dates of 2 weeks in cash, and that's great, except sometimes it can take a little bit of time for that title company to pull title, to review title, to make sure there's nothing there. And if there is something there, you want to give them enough time to be able to remedy those items. Usually it's in your contract saying that if there's any title issues, you'll extend the closing, or you may not have the need to close if there's something that's uncurable in the title report. So you're actually asking the title company to pull title on that asset so that way you can move forward with your sale and have that timing work out right, especially if you're trying to close really fast to get a great deal under contract and a great deal sold or closed as fast as you possibly can. Okay. So you got to get that escrow process started, and usually you're going to go through next, and you're going to give all that information over to the lender pending a final renovation bid. You should already have a preliminary bid from your initial walkthrough of the property with 30 plus pictures of the property so you can provide that to the lender and say, this is my general bid right now on the property. And even if you're finalizing it with the contractor, you want to get that over to your lender right away, because it can take a few days to get through underwriting. It can take a lot longer to order an appraisal on a property. Appraisals are one of the biggest problems right now because a lot of the appraisal management companies are backed up or inefficient at what they're doing, or they may not have a vendor in your area. So making sure that lender has that info and that appraisal gets ordered immediately is absolutely key. Same thing with getting that inspection ordered right away too. Very, very important from a management standpoint, making sure that that inspector has enough time on their schedule to get out to the property, do their review, coordinate with the current seller that's living in the property or the tenant that's in the property to make sure they're able to do their walkthroughs. Then it usually takes a few days to get back to you with that inspection report. You need to review that inspection report, then go over it with the contractor, hand it off to your contract, or go over it with the actual inspector, hand it off to your contractors and go over it with those contractors also. So that way you can get a finalized bid. And at that same time as the inspection, most of the time you want your contractor doing the walkthrough at the same time. So coordinating those two things is key, because you don't want to disturb the owner multiple times or the tenant multiple times through that process. So, really, really key for being able to get the timing right on this, so you don't disturb that owner or that seller of the property multiple times for your due diligence. You want them all done at the same time, if possible. So they're going to do a walkthrough of the property, your contractor is, along with your inspector. And then once that inspector is done, you're going to give that inspection report over to your contractor to finalize the bid, to make sure there's nothing that the contractor was not aware of on their initial walkthrough. Maybe that contractor didn't go under the house and didn't see that the baseboards are rotted underneath, or there's an issue with water fill underneath, or something along those lines. Those are some of the things the initial walkthrough contractor may not do for you. And you don't really want to send your contractor out to the property until after you have it under contract, because you may not get it under contract. And the majority of the time, on a percentages basis, you're actually not going to get it under contract. So someone else might beat you to it or pay a better price when they're not looking at their numbers correctly or doing their due diligence correctly on that deal. So you don't want to waste that contractor's time by sending them to property after property after property. You really only want to send them once that you have it under contract and it's a viable opportunity to actually close. And you want to have your salesperson or the person that's walking through the property, or you, do that initial assessment and get all the documentation, as many pictures as you can, maybe video walkthrough of that asset, so that you can get a general estimate of what you see is going to be needed on that project, including renovation buffers and things like that. So then all the inspection items can be covered in your numbers too when you hand it off to the lender. Okay. So as you go through and you give all this info to the lender, you're going to give them a finalized renovation bid. You're actually going to order your general liability insurance and ask the lender what their requirements are for those general liability insurance. Make sure you get, if you're doing a construction loan, make sure you get full replacement cost coverage on those items. And then making sure that they have everything they need to be able to be successful at getting that appraisal done and that underwriting done as fast as possible. So they're there for you at closing. Okay. And you always want to make sure you're dealing with a reputable lender that closes escrow like they say they're going to do. You want to make sure that you have your other funding lined up. Are you going to put up the rest of the money that the lender won't? Or do you have an outside joint venture partner or capital partner that you work with to be able to do that as well? Will the lender allow a second position lien in place? So understanding those things up front is absolutely key to your success during this process here. Okay. And then what you're going to do is you're going to review all your documentation and get all that information up front from your closing agent, so that they have all that up front for you so you can do your review. And this is the thing that can cost you a ton of money. So on one deal, we didn't review fully the HUD closing statement, or we thought we did, and we just missed a piece, but the price was wrong by 20 grand. And we didn't notice it right up the front. When we're doing thousands of these things, and tons every single month, obviously certain things can get missed every once in a while. And that was one of our big mistakes, was reviewing that HUD settlement statement or that closing statement to make sure all the numbers are right. Is your insurance on there correctly being paid at closing? Is the price right? Is your loan correct on the property? Is your points and closing costs and lender fees all correct on the property? Do you have property tax and insurance prorations? Is it rented? So you need to make sure that you have rent prorations with that seller involved. Is the seller's paid closing costs if they're paying for closing costs, or if you're paying for closing costs on there correctly? You want to review to make sure, is the seller going to be coming out of pocket at all? Is that expectation hit from what you told them they would net on that deal? So all these things can blow up a sale or screw you big time and cost you 20 grand or more on a deal. So reviewing those settlement statements is absolutely key. Also reviewing all of your documentation, reviewing your loan docs, reviewing your title docs on these things. There's also key. There can be errors across the board in these things, and especially reviewing the warranty deeds that the sellers are signing. Are the names correct? Is everything right on there? The last thing you want is for them to transfer the property into someone else's name, or have them not signing in the capacity of the true seller who's on title, or some other error that can be made. There's human error that goes into this consistently with regard to title companies and closing companies that could exist. So reviewing those things is absolutely imperative to your success. And then you're going to go through, after you review all of that information, then you're going to line up your notary, which should be done before closing, at least a week before or a couple of days before at least, so that way they can be there and coordinate correctly. And either if you're going to have a notary come to you, then you can absolutely go and do that and schedule that with them. Usually it's a couple $100 for a mobile notary to come in, or you can have your in-house notary do it if like we do, or you can go to one of those other places that has a notary and just show up there. Of course, sometimes they may not like that without an appointment, because they might have to be signing, especially in loan docs, a giant package of documents that they need to sign. They might take a ton of time, or you might end up with a notary, for example, in California that has different rules than a notary in another market around the country, and different notary requirements there depending on the laws in that state. So understanding and having a notary that knows what they're doing is absolutely important as well. And then understanding the closing process. So normally you're going to notarize the documents. You're going to scan them in and send them off to the closing attorney via email. And then you're also going to save those in your files, and you're going to go take the rest of the hard copies of the documents, and you're going to overnight them with usually a FedEx label or a overnight label to the closing attorney involved. And you want to confirm that they receive those. And then most importantly, with wire problems and wire fraud and things like that, every single time you get wire instructions, you need to call and confirm those wire instructions, and even go so far as to go to the company website and make sure that the phone numbers that are on the wire instructions are the same, because they've gotten smart now, these fraudsters. They'll go through and put fake phone numbers, so you're calling them, but you're calling the fraudster. You're not calling the closing company. So checking those numbers on their websites to make sure that is a valid number for that closing company is key. And then confirming those wire instructions every single time is super important whenever you're wiring funds to closing. And so hopefully this helped you guys save 20 grand or more on your deal through understanding the proper process, the proper timeline involved. And if you guys like this content, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'd be glad to come out with additional content for you on a consistent basis. I appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.